welcome back to whispers in the dark. Turn down the lights, close the curtains, and make certain every door in your home is locked. Beyond the glass, the moon may appear peaceful, but some ancient things are drawn to its light. Some curses do not remain buried. Some beasts still remember the taste of human blood. Settle in, listen closely, and remember that when the forest becomes silent, it is rarely because you are alone. Now, let's begin. The first body was discovered in the eastern field shortly before sunrise. Thomas Wren, a shepherd who had lived in the village of Gravenmere for 63 years, found what remained of the man beside a collapsed stone wall. At first, he believed the dark shape among the wet grass was a dead animal. The autumn fog lay so thick across the field that every tree and fence seemed to fade into a colorless void. Thomas approached with his lantern held before him. The light revealed a black wool coat, then a hand. The fingers had been driven deep into the earth, as though the dying man had attempted to drag himself away from whatever had attacked him. Thomas raised the lantern higher. The dead man had been opened from his throat to his stomach. His ribs had been forced apart. Shattered bone rose from the wound like the broken bars of a cage. His intestines had been pulled across the grass in glistening coils, and several organs were missing entirely. The right arm lay several feet from the body. The face had been mutilated so viciously that Thomas could identify him only by the silver ring still clinging to one bloodless finger. The dead man was Silas Harrow. He was the eldest son of Blackthorn Hall. Thomas stumbled backwards and vomited against the stone wall. There were tracks surrounding the corpse. They were too large to have belonged to any wolf known in England. Each print was long and deep, with 5 distinct claws pressed into the mud. Near the body, the tracks resembled those of a huge animal. Farther towards the forest, they changed. The heels became narrow. The toes lengthened. For several yards, whatever had killed Silas appeared to have walked upright. By midday, every person in Gravenmere had heard the news. Some blamed a wolf escaped from a traveling menagerie. Others spoke of a madman living in the woods. A few of the oldest villagers whispered a name that had not been spoken openly for decades: the Blackthorn Beast. At the edge of the village stood an abandoned chapel whose roof had collapsed long ago. Inside its ruined walls, concealed beneath moss and climbing ivy, there was a stone carving of a man with the head of a wolf. Beneath the carving was an inscription written in Latin: "Blood remembers what the mind forgets." The villagers avoided the chapel. They also avoided the forest after sunset. Blackthorn Hall stood beyond that forest, surrounded by dead gardens and iron fences blackened with rust. The estate had belonged to the Harrow family for more than 200 years. Once, its halls had hosted musicians, politicians, and wealthy aristocrats from across the country. Now its windows were dark, its roof sagged beneath years of rain, and its gardens had become a wilderness of thorn bushes and twisted trees. Only 3 members of the Harrow family remained. Silas had been the first. His father, Lord Elias Harrow, was the second. The third was a man who had not returned to Gravenmere for 18 years. His name was Adrian Harrow. The telegram reached Adrian in London on the evening of October the 17th, 1891. He was standing backstage at the Lyceum Theatre, wiping stage blood from his face after playing the role of a murdered prince, when an assistant handed him the envelope. Adrian had built a modest reputation as an actor. He was known for playing tortured men, doomed lovers, and criminals driven mad by guilt. Audiences admired the intensity of his performances, although few understood where that intensity came from. Adrian understood it perfectly. Every scream he gave upon the stage belonged to the frightened boy he had once been. Every expression of grief came from memories of his mother. Every moment of rage was meant for his father. The telegram contained only 11 words. Silas is dead. Come home before the next moon. Eleanor Lockwood. Adrian read the message twice. His fingers began to tremble. He had not spoken to his brother in 7 years. Their last letter had ended in anger. Silas had accused Adrian of abandoning the family. Adrian had answered that there was nothing left in Gravenmere worth saving. Now Silas was dead, and Eleanor Lockwood, the woman Silas had intended to marry, was asking Adrian to return. He left London the following morning. The train journey north took nearly an entire day. Rain streaked the windows, while factories and crowded streets gradually gave way to open countryside. Adrian sat alone in his compartment, watching bare trees slide past beneath a bruised gray sky. He remembered running through those trees as a child. He remembered Silas laughing somewhere ahead of him. He remembered their mother standing at the forest edge, calling them home before darkness fell. Then another memory surfaced. His mother screaming inside Blackthorn Hall. His father's hands covered in blood. A locked door in the cellar. Something striking the other side of that door with enough force to shake the walls. Adrian closed his eyes. For years, he had convinced himself those memories were distorted fragments of childhood terror. His mother had died after falling from the western balcony. His father had said it was an accident. Adrian had never believed him. The train arrived at Gravenmere after sunset. No carriage waited at the station. The platform was deserted, except for a station master who refused to meet Adrian's gaze. When Adrian asked for transport to Blackthorn Hall, the man shook his head. Not tonight. I will pay whatever is required. There is no driver in Gravenmere who will take that road after dark. Adrian looked towards the distant tree line. Then I shall walk. The station master caught his arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. The moon is almost full. Adrian pulled free. So I have been told. You do not understand. No, Adrian replied. I suspect that I understand far more than I wish to. He collected his case and began walking. The road from the station wound through the village, past narrow stone houses and shuttered shops. Faces appeared behind curtains. Doors were locked as he passed. Somewhere inside the church, a bell rang 7 times. No one remained outside. At the final house, an elderly woman stood beneath the shelter of a wooden porch. She wore a black shawl and held a string of silver beads between her hands. When Adrian approached, she raised her eyes. You have your mother's face. Adrian stopped. Did you know her? Everyone knew Lady Marian. The woman stepped towards him. Your mother was kind, too kind for that house. Adrian felt an old pain tightening in his chest. What happened to my brother? The woman looked at the forest. Something found him. What sort of thing? The same thing that found your mother. The wind moved through the village, carrying the smell of rain and distant smoke. Adrian lowered his voice. My mother fell. That is what your father told the magistrate. And what do you believe? I believe your mother was trying to escape. From my father. The woman looked directly at him. From what your father became. A wolf howled somewhere in the forest. The sound was deep and strangely resonant. Adrian felt it vibrate through his ribs. The woman pressed the silver beads into his hand. Keep these near your heart. Adrian examined them. Each bead had been engraved with a tiny cross. I am not a religious man. Neither is the beast. She retreated into her house and locked the door. Adrian continued alone. The forest began beyond the last cottage. Ancient oaks leaned across the road, their branches weaving together overhead. Fallen leaves covered the ground in wet layers. The rain had stopped, but water continued dripping from the trees. Adrian walked for nearly an hour. Several times, he heard movement among the undergrowth. The sounds followed him. When he stopped, they stopped. He imagined yellow eyes watching from behind the trees. At last, the gates of Blackthorn Hall emerged from the darkness. One gate hung open. The iron bars were decorated with wolves. Beyond them, the estate rose from the fog. Blackthorn Hall appeared larger than Adrian remembered. Its 4 towers seemed to pierce the clouds. Stone gargoyles crouched along the roof. Most of the windows were dark, although a faint glow shone from the main entrance. A woman stood beneath the doorway. She carried a lantern and wore a dark green dress beneath a traveling cloak. Rain had dampened her auburn hair, and exhaustion had hollowed the skin beneath her eyes. Adrian, he recognized Eleanor Lockwood from a photograph Silas had once sent him. Miss Lockwood, she descended the steps. I feared you would not come. I almost did not. Her expression tightened. I know you and Silas were not close in recent years. We were close once. He spoke of you often, kindly, not always. Despite the circumstances, Adrian almost smiled. That sounds like Sela's. Alina led him inside. The entrance hall smelled of cold stone, extinguished fires, and dust. Large portraits covered the walls. Generations of Harrow men stared down from gilded frames, each with the same dark eyes and severe expression. Adrian paused before the portrait of his mother. Marion Harrow had been painted in a white dress, seated beside an open window. The artist had captured her warmth, but something in her eyes suggested fear. A long scratch crossed the lower half of the canvas. 4 parallel marks had torn through the painted fabric of her dress. "Who did that?" Adrian asked. Alina turned. "No one knows." The marks looked disturbingly similar to claw wounds. Footsteps sounded from the upper landing. Lord Elias Harrow appeared at the top of the staircase. Adrian had prepared himself to see an old man. He had not prepared himself to see a ruin. Elias was tall but terribly thin. His cheeks had collapsed against the bones of his face. Long white hair hung to his shoulders. One eye had become clouded with blindness, and 3 scars crossed his forehead. He descended slowly, leaning upon a cane carved in the shape of a wolf's head. "Adrian, Father," Elias stopped several steps above him. "You've been away a long time." "Not long enough." Alina glanced between them. Elias gave a dry laugh. "London has sharpened your tongue. Gravenmere sharpened everything else." For an instant, anger flickered across the old man's face. Then it disappeared. "You came for your brother." "Yes." "Sela's is buried in the family crypt. Before an investigation, the body could not be preserved." Adrian looked at him. "Because of the wounds. Because there was very little left to preserve." Alina lowered her eyes. Adrian climbed the first step. "What killed him?" Elias stared through him with his one clear eye. "A wild animal. The tracks walked on 2 legs. Men frightened by death frequently see impossible things, and mothers frightened by husbands." Elias tightened his grip on the cane. Alina spoke before either man could continue. "Adrian has traveled all day. He should rest." "Of course," Elias said. "Rest while you can." That night, Adrian slept in his childhood room. Nothing had changed. Wooden soldiers still stood upon the shelves. A faded map of the world hung above the desk. His old bed seemed impossibly small. The window overlooked the forest. Adrian unpacked his clothes, then placed the silver beads on the bedside table. He did not believe in curses. He did not believe in monsters. Yet when the moon appeared between the clouds, he closed the curtains. Sleep came slowly. He dreamed of Sela's. They were children again, running through the forest. Sela's disappeared behind the trees. Adrian followed the sound of his laughter until he reached the ruined chapel. Sela's stood before the stone carving. His back faced Adrian. "Where have you been?" Adrian asked. Sela's turned. His face had been eaten away. The lower jaw hung from a strip of skin. His eyes were empty sockets filled with crawling insects. "You left me," Silas whispered. Something enormous rose behind him. Adrian awoke to the sound of scratching. He sat upright. The room was dark. Scratching came from the window. Slowly, Adrian pulled back the curtain. A pale face stared at him from the other side of the glass. Silas. His dead brother clung to the outer wall 3 stories above the ground. Blood poured from his empty mouth. His broken fingers scraped against the window. Adrian stumbled backwards. Lightning illuminated the room. The face vanished. Adrian seized the candle from the bedside table and approached the glass again. Nothing was outside, only rain. He remained awake until dawn. The following morning, Alina took Adrian to the crypt. It stood behind the hall within an overgrown cemetery. Stone angels watched from among tall weeds. The Harrow family mausoleum was built into the side of a low hill, its entrance sealed by an iron door. Alina carried a key. "You buried him?" Adrian asked. "Your father ordered the servants to do it." "Where are those servants now?" "They left the estate the following morning." "All of them?" "All except Mr. Crane." Adrian had not seen the old groundskeeper since arriving. "Where is he?" "No one knows." The iron door opened with a groan. Cold air drifted from the darkness. They descended a narrow flight of steps. Coffins rested within alcoves carved into the stone walls. Adrian recognized the names of grandparents, uncles, and distant cousins. Many had died young. His mother's coffin lay at the far end. Sila's had been placed beside her. Fresh scratches covered the lid. Adrian approached. The wood had been damaged from the inside. Alina whispered his name. Adrian touched the splintered surface. "These marks were not here when he was buried," she said. "Are you certain?" "I watched them seal the coffin." Adrian found an iron tool beside the wall. "What are you doing?" "Opening it. Your father forbade anyone from disturbing the body. My father has forbidden many things." He forced the tool beneath the lid. The nails resisted, then tore free with a series of sharp cracks. A terrible smell filled the crypt. Alina covered her mouth. Silas lay inside. His wounds had been concealed beneath a burial cloth. Adrian pulled it aside. The throat was gone. Ragged flesh surrounded the exposed bones of the neck. Part of the chest had been crushed inward. The skin around the wounds had darkened, but there was less decay than expected. Adrian examined the hands. Several fingernails were broken. Fresh blood marked the fingertips. Alina backed away. He was alive. "No." He scratched the coffin. "These wounds would have killed him within minutes." "Then how do you explain it?" Adrian looked at his brother's face. Silas had been buried with his eyes closed. Now they were open. A faint amber color surrounded the pupils. Adrian leaned closer. Silas's lips moved. "Behind you." Adrian spun around. Something struck him across the chest. He flew against the wall. Alina screamed. A man emerged from the darkness between the coffins. It was Mr. Crane, the groundskeeper. At least, it had once been Mr. Crane. His clothes hung in torn strips. Blood and mud covered his body. His left ear was missing. The exposed wound crawled with maggots, yet Crane appeared not to notice. He raised a shovel above Alina's head. Adrian seized his arm. Crane turned with shocking speed and bit Adrian's shoulder. The teeth tore through coat, shirt, and skin. Adrian shouted and struck him repeatedly until the groundskeeper released his grip. Crane laughed. Yellow saliva ran from his mouth. "It is awake," he whispered. Adrian forced him against a stone pillar. "What is awake?" "The blood." Crane's eyes moved towards Silas's coffin. "Your brother heard it calling. He thought he could kill the source." "What source?" "The first father." Crane convulsed. His spine bent violently. A cracking sound came from his chest. Alina stepped backwards. "Adrian." Crane's jaw opened wider than seemed possible. Black fluid poured from his mouth. "He lives below the house." Then Crane drove his own head against the stone pillar. Once, twice, a third time, his skull collapsed. He slid to the floor, leaving blood and fragments of bone across the wall. For several seconds, neither Adrian nor Alina moved. Then Silas sat upright in the coffin. Alina screamed again. Silas looked at Adrian. His dead lungs drew a wet breath. "Do not let father see the moon." His body shuddered. The eyes rolled back. He collapsed. This time, he did not move again. Adrian and Alina fled the crypt. Back inside the hall, Alina cleaned the bite on Adrian's shoulder. Crane's teeth had left a deep crescent of torn flesh. "You need a doctor. I am fortunate enough to be surrounded by several miles of empty forest. The village physician may still come before nightfall. I doubt anyone will approach this house." Alina wrapped a bandage around his shoulder. "You believe what Crane said?" "I believe he was terrified." "Do you think your father killed Silas?" Adrian stared through the nearest window. The sky was already darkening. "I think Silas discovered something beneath this house." Alina hesitated. "There is an old laboratory in the eastern wing." "What laboratory?" "Your father spent years studying diseases of the blood." Silas believed his work had become dangerous. "My father is not a physician." "No, but your grandfather was." Adrian remembered the locked cellar door. "Show me." The eastern wing had been abandoned since Adrian's childhood. Dust covered the corridors. Mice scattered beneath rotting furniture. At the end of the hall, Alina uncovered a narrow door concealed behind a tapestry. A spiral staircase descended beneath the house. The air grew warmer with every step. At the bottom, they discovered a brick chamber filled with medical equipment. Rusted instruments lay upon tables. Glass jars contained organs suspended in cloudy fluid. Leather restraints hung from an iron examination chair. Shelves held dozens of notebooks. Adrian opened one. The handwriting belonged to his grandfather, Dr. Augustus Harrow. The first pages described an expedition through the Carpathian Mountains in 1828. Augustus had traveled with a group of hunters searching for a creature blamed for the deaths of 16 villagers. They captured it during a winter storm. The creature had worn the shape of a man when the sun rose. His name was Lucian Varg. Augustus brought him back to England in chains. The later entries described experiments, blood transfusions, surgical examinations, forced exposure to moonlight, attempts to remove organs during transformation. Several pages were stained with blood. Adrian read the final entry aloud. The affliction does not reside within the flesh alone. It exists as a memory inside the blood. Every wound closes. Every bone restores itself. Death merely delays the change. I have injected the blood into dogs, wolves, and condemned prisoners. All transformations failed. The creature claims only his descendants may carry the gift. Elinor stood beside a large wooden cabinet. The gift, madness, often describes itself kindly. She opened the cabinet. Inside hung a human skin. It had been removed almost perfectly from the body, beginning at the throat and continuing to the ankles. The face remained attached. The skin belonged to a young man. A label identified him as Nathaniel Harrow, Adrian's great uncle. Elinor recoiled. Adrian opened another notebook. This one belonged to his father. Elias had continued the experiments. He had injected himself with preserved blood taken from Lucian Varg. For months, nothing happened. Then Elias fathered his first child, Silas. The following entry had been written many years later. The blood rejected me, but it has accepted the boy. Adrian felt the room tilt beneath him. He turned more pages. There were drawings of Silas as a child, measurements of his teeth, samples of hair, descriptions of violent fevers during the full moon. Another line had been underlined repeatedly. The second son shows no signs. Adrian's childhood had been recorded as though he were an animal. His weight, his dreams, his temper, the death of his mother appeared near the end. Marion discovered the chamber. She attempted to release the original subject. I stopped her. During the struggle, Silas witnessed my condition. Marion fled to the balcony. The boy transformed. She fell while escaping him. Adrian dropped the notebook. Silas had killed their mother, not deliberately, not as himself, but the truth was written in his father's hand. Elinor found a final document beneath the others. It was a letter from Silas. Father has kept the first creature alive beneath the estate for more than 60 years. Its blood preserves it. Its wounds heal no matter how deeply they are cut. Father believes he can control the curse by studying it, but every experiment strengthens the connection between them. I have felt the creature inside my dreams. It calls me brother. Tomorrow night, I will enter the lower chamber and end this. Adrian looked towards a second door at the rear of the laboratory. Heavy chains crossed its surface. From beyond, it came the faint sound of breathing. Alina whispered, "Adrian, we should leave." The breathing stopped. A voice spoke through the door. "Marion." Adrian froze. It sounded like his mother. "Marion, is that you?" Alina reached for him. "That is not her." The voice changed. It became Sela's. "Adrian, please." He stepped towards the door. The chains trembled. "Adrian, it is dark." The voice became that of a frightened child, his own childhood voice. "Do not leave me here." The lock exploded. The door flew open. Something enormous emerged from the darkness. Adrian saw gray fur, a mouth crowded with teeth, and eyes that shone like molten gold. The creature struck Alina aside. Adrian threw himself between them. Claws entered his abdomen. He felt them tear through muscle. The creature lifted him from the floor. Its face was neither human nor wolf. The skull was long, but the eyes burned with terrible intelligence. Torn lips exposed yellow fangs. Patches of fur had been removed from its body, revealing layers of scar tissue and old surgical wounds. An iron collar encircled its neck. The name Lucien Varg had been engraved upon it. The creature inhaled Adrian's scent. Then it smiled. "Blood of my blood." It threw him through a table. Glass shattered beneath Adrian's body. Alina seized a lantern and smashed it against the creature. Flames spread across its fur. Lucien roared. The sound shook dust from the ceiling. Adrian grabbed Alina, and together they ran for the staircase. The creature followed. Its claws scraped against the bricks as it climbed. They reached the corridor and slammed the concealed door. A moment later, something struck the other side. The wood bent. A second impact tore the hinges loose. Adrian and Alina ran through the eastern wing. Behind them, Lucien burst into the corridor. Moonlight poured through a broken window. The moment it touched the creature, its body began changing. The transformation was hideous. Lucien's fur withdrew into his skin as though pulled inward by thousands of invisible needles. His long muzzle collapsed. The bones folded with wet, cracking sounds. Fangs loosened and fell from his gums, landing across the floor like bloody pieces of ivory. His shoulders narrowed. His claws split down the middle, becoming human fingers. The spine shortened one vertebra at a time. He screamed throughout the change, not with the roar of a beast, but with the voice of an old man being slowly broken upon a wheel. Within moments, a naked human figure lay trembling on the floor. Lucien Varg appeared ancient beyond measure. His skin was colorless and covered in scars. Metal staples remained buried in his chest. Both ears had been removed. His nose had been cut away, leaving two dark openings above his mouth. He looked at Adrian. The moon gives, Lucian whispered. The sun steals. Then Elias entered the corridor, carrying a silver-bladed spear. He drove it through Lucian's chest. The old man gasped. Elias twisted the weapon and forced Lucian against the wall. You should have remained below. Lucian gripped the spear. You cannot cage your father forever. I am not your son. You drank my blood. Elias pushed the blade deeper. And I mastered it. Lucian laughed. You still believe that? He pulled himself along the spear until the blade burst from his back. Blood poured down his chest. Then he placed his mouth against Elias' cheek. You smell of moonlight. Elias ripped the weapon free. Lucian fell. His body began healing immediately. The wound closed around exposed bone. Torn arteries twisted together like worms. New muscle formed across his chest. Elias turned to Adrian. Take a leaner and leave the estate. You caused this. I attempted to cure it. You infected Silas. I gave him strength. You turned him into a monster. Elias looked towards Lucian. I turned him into an heir. A bell began ringing in the village. Once, twice, the moon was rising. Elias stared towards the window. His face changed. Not physically, not yet, but Adrian saw hunger enter his father's eyes. Elias dropped the spear and fled. Lucian rose from the floor. His body was already transforming again. The moonlight spread across his skin. Hair erupted from his shoulders in thick black waves. His fingers lengthened. The nails peeled away as claws pushed through the exposed beds. His jaw tore open at both corners, splitting the cheeks as the muzzle forced itself forward. Adrian and Alina ran. They reached the entrance hall as every window in Blackthorn Hall exploded. A roar filled the estate. Outside, dogs began barking across the distant village. Then the barking stopped. Adrian's wound burned. He pressed a hand against his abdomen. The claw marks had closed. Only 4 pink scars remained. Elinor saw them. Your wounds. Adrian touched his shoulder. Crane's bite had also healed. No. Pain struck him without warning. His knees hit the floor. Heat spread through his veins. It felt as though boiling oil had been poured into his bloodstream. His heart began beating so violently that the skin across his chest jumped with every pulse. Alina knelt beside him. Adrian, get away from me. What is happening? Get away. His teeth began to ache. The roots shifted inside his gums. Adrian clamped both hands over his mouth as his front teeth loosened and dropped onto his tongue. He spat them across the marble floor. New teeth pushed through the bleeding sockets. They were longer, sharper. His fingernails darkened. The skin beneath them swelled until each nail tore free. Blood ran over his hands. Black claws emerged from the wounds, growing rapidly until they scraped against the floor. Alina backed away. Adrian tried to speak. His tongue had become too large for his mouth. His jaw dislocated with a loud crack. He fell forward, choking. The bones of his face began to move. His nose broke and flattened. The cartilage stretched outward. His upper jaw pushed away from the skull, while his lower jaw lengthened to meet it. The skin across his cheeks split under the pressure. His ears crawled upwards along the sides of his head. Every sound inside the hall became unbearable. Aliner's heartbeat thundered. Rats moved behind the walls. Rain struck the roof like handfuls of gravel. Adrian screamed. The scream deepened into a growl. His spine arched. One vertebra burst from the skin of his back, then sank into place as the surrounding flesh healed. His shoulders widened until the seams of his coat tore apart. Muscles swelled along his arms. The bones lengthened, forcing his elbows into new positions. His ribs cracked one after another. The chest expanded. His shirt ripped open. Dark hair pushed through every pore. It emerged first along his spine, then spread across his shoulders and stomach. Each strand felt like hot wire being drawn through his flesh. His legs twisted beneath him. The knees reversed with a sickening series of snaps. His shoes split as the feet stretched. Toes fused, separated, and hardened into clawed shapes. Adrian's thoughts began to dissolve. He remembered his name. Then he remembered blood. He remembered Aliner. Then he heard the pulse in her throat. She stood only 10 feet away. Warmed, afraid, alive, he smelled the blood inside her body. The beast pushed against his mind. Take her. Adrian drove his claws into the floor. Marble cracked beneath them. Run, he tried to say. What emerged was a roar. Aliner ran. Adrian chased her. He crossed the entrance hall in a single bound. She reached the staircase, but he seized the back of her cloak. The fabric tore. She fell. Adrian landed above her. Saliva hung from his fangs. Her face reflected in his eyes. She did not scream. Instead, she reached into Adrian's discarded coat and removed the silver beads. She pressed them against his chest. Smoke rose from his fur. Pain exploded through him. Adrian recoiled. Aliner crawled away. He struck a pillar, shattering part of it, then threw himself through the nearest window. Glass sliced across his body. The wounds healed before he reached the ground. He landed on all fours outside Blackthorn Hall. The forest called to him. From somewhere among the trees came another howl, then another. Lucian, Elias, 3 beasts now hunted beneath the moon. Adrian ran into the forest. Speed transformed the world. Trees blurred around him. Roots and stones passed beneath his claws. He could smell rabbits hidden underground, foxes crouched in hollow logs, and people sheltering behind wooden doors in the distant village. He smelled fear. He smelled death. Then he smelled his father. Elias waited beside the ruined chapel. The old man had become a towering silver creature with a broad chest and a mane of white fur. One eye remained clouded, but the other glowed amber. He stood upright. Adrian circled him. Elias spoke through a mouth filled with fangs. You were always the stronger son. Adrian lunged. Their bodies collided. They crashed through the chapel wall. Elias struck him across the face. Claws tore away Adrian's cheek, exposing his teeth through the wound. The flesh immediately began knitting together. Adrian bit into his father's shoulder. Bone shattered between his jaws. Elias howled and threw him across the ruins. Lucian appeared at the chapel entrance. He had changed into something larger than either of them. Decades of captivity and repeated transformation had distorted his body. Extra bone protruded from his shoulders. His front claws dragged along the ground. The remains of iron chains hung from his wrists. He looked from Elias to Adrian. My children. Elias attacked him. Lucian caught Elias by the throat. With one hand, he lifted the silver beast from the ground. Then he drove his claws into Elias' stomach and pulled downward. The abdomen opened. Entrails spilled across the chapel floor. Elias clawed at Lucian's face, but the ancient creature did not release him. Lucian thrust his muzzle into the wound and tore out part of Elias' liver. Adrian attacked from behind. He climbed onto Lucian's back and buried his claws beneath the creature's ribs. Lucian twisted. Adrian's arm snapped. The broken bone pierced through the skin. Lucian seized the exposed limb and tore it from the shoulder. Adrian fell. His severed arm lay several feet away, fingers still twitching. Pain blinded him. Lucian advanced. Adrian watched new bone emerge from the ruined shoulder. It grew slowly, coated in red tissue. Tendons stretched across it. Muscle followed. Within seconds, a new hand formed, the claws pushing through last. Adrian rose. Lucian charged. Before they collided, a gunshot echoed through the chapel. Lucian's head jerked sideways. Smoke rose from a wound in his temple. Elinor stood outside, holding an old hunting rifle. She fired again. A silver bullet struck Lucian's chest. The creature screamed. The wound did not heal. Adrian understood. He threw himself at Lucian. They rolled across the chapel floor, crashing through the stone carving of the wolf-headed man. Elinor reloaded. Elias crawled through his own entrails towards her. His body attempted to heal, pulling the organs back into the open cavity. Intestines slid across the stones like pale serpents, retreating into his abdomen. Elinor aimed at him. Elias became human before she fired. The transformation forced him to the ground. Fur withdrew. Bones contracted. His wounded stomach closed, trapping dirt and fragments of stone beneath the skin. He looked like a helpless old man. Elinor, he whispered, please. She hesitated. Elias smiled. His hand remained clawed. He struck the rifle from her grip and seized her throat. Adrian heard her choking. He turned from Lucian. That moment of distraction nearly killed him. Lucian bit into Adrian's neck. The jaws closed around his spine. Adrian felt several vertebrae break. His legs collapsed. Lucian shook him violently, tearing muscle and arteries. Blood sprayed across the chapel walls. The beast released him. Adrian lay paralyzed while his body repaired itself. Across the ruins, Elias dragged Alina towards the forest. Adrian tried to stand. His legs did not respond. Lucian lowered his face. You cannot resist what you are. Adrian stared into those ancient eyes. Perhaps Lucian was right. Perhaps there was no man remaining within him. Then Adrian remembered his mother. Not her death, her life. He remembered her sitting beside his childhood bed during storms. He remembered her singing while rain struck the windows. He remembered the warmth of her hand against his forehead. The beast had inherited his blood. It had not inherited his love. Adrian drove both claws into Lucian's ears. He pulled. The sides of Lucian's skull tore open. Adrian forced his thumbs into the exposed wounds and pushed until he felt bone fracture. Lucian roared. Adrian twisted his head. The neck broke. It would not kill him, but it gave Adrian time. He crawled towards the rifle. Elias reached the forest with Alina. Adrian seized the weapon. His fingers had become partly human as clouds moved across the moon. He aimed. Elias placed Alina between them. You cannot kill me without killing her. Adrian looked at Alina. She looked back. Then she drove the silver beads into Elias' damaged eye. Elias screamed and released her. Adrian fired. The bullet entered his father's mouth. It shattered the teeth, tore through the tongue, and burst from the back of his skull in a fountain of blood and bone. Elias remained standing for several seconds. Then the moon emerged fully. His final transformation began. The face stretched around the wound. Fur covered the ruined skull. The body expanded, but the silver inside his brain burned through every new layer of tissue. Smoke poured from his eyes. He fell onto his back. The chest split open. A blackened heart beat once between the ribs. Then it stopped. Lord Elias Harrow was dead. Behind Adrian, Lucian's neck snapped back into place. The ancient creature charged. Adrian turned the rifle. Lucian struck it aside. The weapon broke against the wall. They fought through the ruins. Claws tore flesh. Teeth crushed bone. Lucian drove Adrian against the stone altar and opened his chest with a single swipe. Adrian's lungs collapsed. His heart became visible beneath shattered ribs. Lucian reached into the wound. His claws closed around the beating organ. You belong to me. Adrian grabbed the iron collar around Lucian's neck. A length of chain still hung from it. He wrapped the chain around Lucian's throat and pulled. The creature laughed. Then Alina appeared behind him, holding the silver blade from Elias' spear. She drove it through Lucian's back. The point emerged beneath his ribs. Adrian seized it. Together, they forced the blade upwards. It passed through Lucian's chest, through his throat, into the base of his skull. Lucian stopped laughing. His claws released Adrian's heart. The ancient beast staggered backwards. Silver light moved beneath his skin, spreading through his veins. He began to burn from within. His flesh split across the arms and chest. Fire erupted through the wounds. Fur vanished in clouds of foul smoke. The eyes melted and ran down his face like golden wax. Lucian reached for Adrian. I cannot die. Adrian pushed the blade deeper. Then suffer forever. Lucian's body collapsed inward. His ribs folded around his burning organs. His skull cracked. Flames consumed the tongue inside his open mouth. At last, he fell into a pile of ash and blackened bone. Silence settled across the chapel. Adrian returned to human form. As the moon descended behind the clouds, the transformation back was no kinder. His claws withdrew slowly, dragging strips of flesh with them. Fingers shortened with repeated snaps. The muzzle collapsed against his face. Teeth fell out and were replaced again. He lay naked among the ruins, trembling in blood and ash. Elinor covered him with her cloak. It is over, she whispered. Adrian looked at his father's corpse. No, the eastern sky had begun to brighten. They returned to Blackthorn Hall at dawn. The estate was burning. Fire from the underground laboratory had spread through the eastern wing. Flames climbed the towers. Windows burst outward. Centuries of Harrow history turned to smoke. Adrian and Elinor stood beyond the gates. Neither attempted to stop it. Villagers arrived as the sun rose. Some carried buckets. Others carried rifles loaded with silver. The old woman from the final house approached Adrian. She saw the healed wounds across his body. Her expression filled with sorrow. The first father is dead. Yes, and your own. Yes. She looked towards the fatting moon. But the blood remains. Adrian said nothing. The old woman touched the silver beads in Elinor's hand. Those may protect her once. Once, silver can wound the flesh. Love can restrain the mind. Neither can erase what has entered the blood. Adrian looked at Elinor. You should leave Gravenmere. So should you. I cannot. Then I will remain. You saw what I became. I also saw you return. Next time I may not. Elinor stepped closer. Then we prepare for next time. For the following weeks, Adrian lived in an abandoned hunting lodge beyond the village. During the day, he helped bury the victims and destroy every record of his father's experiments. Sela's was laid to rest beside their mother. Elia's was buried outside consecrated ground. No grave was made for Lucian Varg. His ashes were divided into 13 iron containers and sunk in 13 different rivers. When the next full moon approached, Adrian entered the cellar of the hunting lodge. The villagers had reinforced it with stone, iron, and silver. Chains secured his wrists and ankles. Alina remained outside the door. "You must not enter," Adrian told her. "I know, no matter what voice you hear. I know, it may sound like me. It will not be you." Adrian sat against the wall. Moonlight entered through a narrow opening in the ceiling. The change began. His heartbeat accelerated. Sweat covered his body. The bones beneath his skin started to move. Alina heard every moment from the other side of the door. She heard his teeth strike the floor. She heard his fingers break. She heard the wet tearing of skin as fur emerged. She heard him scream her name until his voice became the roar of an animal. The chains pulled tight. Iron bolts tore halfway from the walls. The door shook. Then Adrian spoke. "Alina." She closed her eyes. "Please open the door." His voice was perfectly human. "It hurts." She pressed both hands against her mouth. "I am still myself." The door bent inward. "Alina, please." Claws appeared through the wood. They slowly widened the opening. The voice changed. It became deeper, angrier. "Open the door." She backed away. The beast hurled itself against the barrier. Again and again. Stone cracked. Silver chains snapped one by one. Alina ran up the cellar stairs. Behind her, the final restraint broke. The door exploded outward. The beast entered the lodge. Alina reached the front entrance. A clawed hand seized her shoulder. She turned. Adrian towered above her. His jaws opened. She held the silver beads between them. The beast stared at the tiny crosses. Smoke rose from its chest, but it did not retreat. Instead, it looked into her eyes. For one terrible moment, Alina knew she was about to die. Then the creature released her. It turned towards the open door. Adrian ran into the forest. The howling continued until sunrise. He returned naked and covered in blood. Alina found him beside the river. A dead stag lay nearby. Its throat had been torn out. Adrian had fed, but he had not killed a human being. For 3 months, this continued. Every full moon, the beast escaped. Every morning, Adrian returned. Then winter came. Snow covered Gravenmere. Food became scarce. The animals moved deeper into the wilderness. During the first moon of December, Adrian vanished. At dawn, Alina found no tracks leading back towards the lodge. A farmhand was reported missing. The following morning, part of his body was discovered in the forest. The stomach had been opened. The heart was gone. Alina found Adrian hiding inside the ruined chapel. He was human again. Blood covered his face. "I killed him," he whispered. She approached carefully. "You do not know that. I can taste him." His eyes filled with tears. "I remember his heart beating inside my mouth." Alina knelt before him. "We will find another way." "There is no other way." "There must be." Adrian took her hand. "My father believed he could master the beast. Silas believed he could destroy its source. Both were wrong. What are you saying? The curse does not end with Lucian. He placed her palm against his chest. It lives here. Elinor understood. No, silver must enter the heart. No, before the next moon. I will not kill you. You may not have a choice. On the final night of December, Adrian chained himself inside the ruins of Blackthorn Hall. Snow fell through the burned roof. The villagers surrounded the estate, carrying rifles and torches. Elinor stood closest to him. Adrian wore the torn clothes in which he had returned to Gravenmere. The silver beads rested around his neck. The moon rose. Adrian looked at Elinor. Whatever happens, do not remember the beast. What should I remember? The man who came home too late. You came home when you were needed. Pain entered his expression. It is beginning. The transformation seized him. His back arched until the spine appeared ready to snap. The first claws emerged. Blood ran across the snow. His jaw cracked. Fur spread over his body. Elinor raised the rifle. Adrian screamed. Not yet. His shoulders expanded. The chains strained. Adrian. Not yet. His face pushed forward. The voice became distorted. Wait. The villagers aimed their weapons. Adrian's eyes turned gold. The chains broke. The beast stood before them. It looked at the armed men, then at Elinor. She raised the rifle towards its chest. The creature charged. Elinor fired. The silver bullet struck Adrian's heart. He stumbled. Momentum carried him several more steps. Then he fell at her feet. His body began returning to human form. Fur withdrew. Claws became fingers. The monstrous face collapsed into the face of the man she loved. Adrian looked up at her. For a moment he smiled. Then blood left his mouth. The eyes closed. The forest became silent. Elinor remained beside him until dawn. Adrian Harrow was buried beside his mother and brother. The villagers destroyed the hunting lodge and sealed the ruins of Blackthorn Hall beneath stone and iron. The ruined chapel was dismantled. Its carvings were broken and thrown into the sea. For many years, no animal attacks were reported in Gravenmere. The forest grew peaceful. The village prospered. Elinor eventually left England. She never married. She carried the silver beads until her death. But some stories do not end where people believe they end. 29 years after Adrian Harrow was buried, a young grave robber entered the Harrow crypt. He had heard rumors of jewelry placed inside the coffins of aristocrats. He opened Adrian's tomb shortly before midnight. The coffin was empty. The interior lid was covered in scratches. Fresh mud marked the floor. Leading away from the crypt were the tracks of a barefoot man. They continued into the forest. Halfway between the cemetery and the trees, the tracks changed. The feet lengthened. Claws entered the earth, and from somewhere beyond the ruined foundations of Blackthorn Hall, a wolf began to howl. Thank you for listening to tonight's terrifying story. As you return to the safety of your own world, remember that evil is not always something that hunts us from the darkness. Sometimes it is carried within us. Sometimes it waits inside our blood, sleeping quietly until the moon calls it by name. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in Alina's place. Would you have trusted Adrian to resist the curse? Or would you have fired the silver bullet much sooner? Subscribe for more dark stories, disturbing legends, and horrifying journeys into places best left unexplored. Until next time, keep your doors locked, avoid the forest after sunset, and whatever you hear outside your window tonight, do not answer it. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so divine. Whispers of